Panthers are in full rebuild mode. They decided to pick Teddy Bridgewater up. They thought he was good enough to be a starting quarterback for now. Gave him a 3-year contract, I believe.
Yep.
And surprisingly, they also picked up PJ Walker. They liked what they saw with the XFL league. And we might actually see some competition between the two of them. That'd be really interesting to see. I know PJ Walker was pretty much balling out with the Houston Roughnecks when the XFL was still going on, and he was in the running for MVP. So it'd be kind of interesting to see if Teddy Bridgewater ends up getting overtaken by PJ. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. I'm really interested to see where that team goes with the quarterback position.
Yeah, maybe they try to do something like kind of like how the Saints do with like multiple quarterback formations, which is kind of weird because that only happens when you see the name Taysom Hill somewhere. But
yeah,
maybe they try it. I don't know.
Yeah, and then of course they've got Christian McCaffrey there. They just re-signed him to make him the highest paid running back in the league, and well deserved, no doubt about that. He has been carrying that team on his back for a couple seasons now.
Most definitely, yeah.
And they are going to need him this upcoming season. They're going to need him a lot. This team is still struggling, I think, in my opinion. I know they got a few additions on the offensive line, like Russell Okong, and it's an okay trade, in my opinion. But it doesn't really fix anything. It just kind of switches pieces around to, a tackle is more important than a guard, but will that really change the way that they gave up 58 sacks like last season? I don't really know. That's probably why they actually got Teddy Bridgewater in the first place, was because he is a mobile quarterback. And, they didn't have the ability to fix everything all at once. So what they did was settle for lesser elite talent like Robbie Anderson, which maybe he can evolve and be that number one guy. But they have 3 decent receivers now on offense, and they have plenty talent, in my opinion, on offense to be above average. I don't see them being any explosive like team. They're not going to blow your socks off or anything, but this team can definitely win some games, I think, at least at offensively. Now, defensively, with the unfortunate retirement of Luke Kuechly, I don't see this team's defense getting much better. I know that they picked up Derek Brown, and we talked about how good it was to have 2 above average pass interior rushers with Derek Brown and Quan Short. They're going to be needing those guys to really perform. Quan was out all last season, and he's underrated. He's pretty good. I think he gets overshadowed by the Aaron Donalds and the Geno Atkins because everyone knows those guys. But Quan Short was a big reason why in 2015, 2016, the Panthers went to the Super Bowl in the first place. He shored up the middle of that team along with Luke Kuechly. And with him being out all last season, you could really see that they were struggling, at least in the run defense department. And on top of that, they even got Bravion Roy, another rookie I kind of like. He's also a defense interior lineman. And I think they're going to be at least okay on the defensive line. I have no idea how they're going to do everywhere else. They need help on all the other levels, but at least they've got that shored up. Don't expect a lot from this team. I think they probably go like 4-12, 6-10. They need a lot more pieces to fix this offensive line. And once they do that, they're probably going to shine because, they do have lots of, I think, second guys at receiver position that can eventually evolve into first round, or not first round, but number 1 guys. DJ Moore specifically, I think, can definitely take over the number 1 role. But with the addition to Robbie Anderson, this team has the pieces to start rebuilding, but they're still in the rebuild mode, not expecting much.
You know what I really think they did this offseason was just go and get a bunch of depth They really just went and got guys that aren't necessarily like you said, big name talents, but they did go get like Eli Apple. Like they signed Eli Apple, a couple of D linemen, some offensive linemen, some depth at offensive linemen, and that's kind of important because you get some competition in there. And when those guys start feeling competition for their job, their starting job, they start playing better. They start doing things that they didn't do last season. So you never know, some of those guys that weren't as good last season that were still getting that first team reps and everything and games and everything. Maybe those guys step up because they got some competition behind them, or maybe some of those guys just, if they don't step up, then they just get kicked out, and then the guys behind them start running things.
Yeah, I mean, to go off that, this is a big couple years for Teddy Bridgewater. He's got, some time to prove that he's a starting quarterback, and there's a lot of question marks with him. And this is an opportunity to show that they can build around him. If he does well with what's around him, they will build pieces for him. I think he is a franchise quarterback. We saw it with the Vikings. He kind of, he had an unfortunate injury, and that just pushed him out of that starting role. And, just bad timing for him. But I don't see them going after specifically quarterback in the next couple of years. I think they are okay with Teddy Bridgewater and PJ Walker, and I think they will be okay with those guys. It just is a matter of how many games that they win, what position they'll be in the draft. I don't see them picking number 1. I see them maybe picking top 5 to top 10, but in between 5 and 10. So that's what I was trying to get at. They're going to be picking probably in between 5 and 10. And with that is a lot of good talent to pick from. We'll have to see what happens next season, but hopefully that they can turn this franchise around here soon.
I kind of think, just to counterbalance you here a little bit, I think the Panthers have the potential to be kind of like a little sleeper team. Not necessarily that they're going to light the world up and win like 13 games, but they could be that extra team that just scoots in with the 7th playoff team being in. So I like you said, with them losing Luke Kuechly, I think that's a big kind of issue for them because they lost their leader, like their number 1 guy, their main team captain kind of position. So somebody's gonna have to step up and fill that. And with some of the additions they made, maybe one of those guys steps up and does it. But I really think Teddy Bridgewater is going to have to come in and start commanding like guys around, like telling them this is how we have to do it. This is what we got to do. We got to start moving, because I think that's a lot of what was missing with Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton, I hate to say this, but he had a little bit too much of an ego for himself, kind of, to be more of a team leader guy. I think that's where Christian McCaffrey kind of started to come in, where he ended up being their team leader kind of guy. He was rallying the troops kind of thing. And with Cam, into Cam Newton's defense, he really only had Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, and then Kyle Allen came in, and Kyle Allen got absolutely toasted for every freaking week. He just got smacked.
58 sacks. I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, and they ended up having a negative turnover ratio because every time he dropped back to throw the ball, he had more pressure in his face than Andy Dalton ever did. And that's really bad, because like the second you start to throw with pressure in your face, nothing's accurate. You're throwing on the run and everything else.
And he was a rookie last season, right? Or this was his first time in action.
Yeah, this is like first full-time season. So maybe Teddy Bridgewater comes in and he kind of, if he has an offensive line, maybe he just fixes things. I think they have the potential to like I said, be that sleeper team that comes in with the final 7th, or just be one of the wild card teams, basically, at the end of the season. Because like you were saying, they did pick up some serious depth at receiver. They got a few guys. They got a lot of like good pieces moving forward. But again, as you said, they could also just be in 100% rebuild mode and just kind of buying their time for a couple of seasons from now.
Yeah, and the only reason I have that sort of position is because there are certain teams who are not doing great, but they can beat any team on any given Sunday. The Panthers are one of those teams currently with their roster is a very big question mark. They've got to figure out quarterback. They got to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their defense. They're a team I don't think can go out and beat any team on given Sunday. Another team, a couple teams that we'll talk about in this division that I think can beat any other team on any Sunday, like the Falcons. I'm more worried about them when it comes to a schedule. And in the Panthers' defense, as I look at their schedule last season, they had a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they played the Texans, the 49ers, the Packers, they played Seattle. They had some really tough competition sprinkled in there. The Titans, they had it a little rough. And plus, on top of that, I think they just lost momentum. They came out, were 4-2. They lost really bad to the 49ers, and they even bounced back and beat the Titans. But right after that, they lose to the Packers, Falcons, Saints, Washington. They go on an 8-game losing streak. This team, halfway through the season, was 5-3. And that's nothing to scoff at. I know our Bengals were there 2 seasons ago, and we thought we had some serious talent on our team. It just happens to some teams. But as it stands right now, losing Luke Kuechly is a big loss, in my opinion. And, I think maybe getting rid of Cam Newton, it could be a beneficial thing. It could be a detriment. He might have been carrying this team. We don't really know what his presence there really meant to the team. Mm-hmm. I do agree with you. Christian McCaffrey did take the team under his wing. He's now the new leader. But it will be interesting to see if that has any implication as to why they went on an 8-game losing streak. Is it because, is he the piece that they need to move forward, or is he just the additional piece that they need to succeed? That's a really rough way to phrase it, but basically, quarterbacks are the leaders of the team, and most of the time, when you have a really, really good team, you have a really, really good quarterback. You just look at Packers, Seattle, 49ers, Texans, Saints,
Chiefs, all them.
Chiefs. It just really will depend on whether or not Teddy Bridgewater is the guy there, in my opinion. If he's the guy there, oh yeah, definitely a sleeper pick. But if he's not, then it could be really ugly.
I really think they decided to move on from Cam Newton, one, because he was kind of demanding more money than he had showed the past couple of seasons. He didn't have a whole lot of help around him, but I still think that with what his ego was, he was kind of an Antonio Brown situation, in my opinion. Not that he was going out and saying this, that, and the other, but he would go out sometimes and just be like, look, I did my job. I don't know what everybody else is doing, kind of thing. And you can't really be that kind of guy. I mean,
point and blame.
Yeah, point and blame. Honestly, when it comes down to it, and you're talking to media as an NFL player, if they say anything about your teammates, honestly, just turn it back on yourself. Be like, I could have done this better. I could have done something better. Because the media, regardless of what they are, will find a reason to be like, oh, look, Cam Newton said this about Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey could have ran the ball better. He could have took a handoff better or something like that. Even if that's not exactly what he said, they'll find a way to be like, look, he said his teammate's name, so we need to get that into the news. And that's kind of how they roll. So then that just kind of paints your team in a bad light. And I know it doesn't sound like it should have a lot to do with your team, but when you start hearing media about your team doing this, that, and the other, you kind of start to believe it, and then you're hearing it, and then your team just starts to implode a little bit, like they did. So, I mean, could it be they imploded last year because Cam Newton was gone? Maybe. Do I think Teddy Bridgewater can fill that? I really think he can, because he's a little bit of a throwback to earlier Cam Newton, when Cam Newton would be rolling out, running all over the field, kind of doing his Superman thing or whatever. But Cam Newton, as of the last couple of years, he's been hurt. He's slowing down. He's doing this, that, and the other. And so maybe Teddy Bridgewater comes in and is what Cam Newton was a couple of years ago when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, maybe. And he could probably be more stable, especially with the media perception. And in no regards is Cam Newton a bad
Yeah, not at
person
all.
either.
Not at all. Not
I
at
think he's totally misconstrued as some sort of diva, but he had those tendencies and that perception that people could get behind and believe. And Teddy Bridgewater is more of a guy who leads by example.
Yeah.
So they might need that. And, you know, we'll see how he does. I want to know if the offensive line has improved, if they've developed at all. I hope Russell Okung can possibly shave off 10 of those sacks. I mean, 58 sacks. That's
That's ridiculous.
it's hard to even have any sort of offense with that sort of pressure in your face, like you said.